the orchard, the dungeon, and the girl who never heard him calling. Chapter 6, Maribel above the silence. Maribel Aster woke before the maid came. She knew because the room had not yet prepared itself to receive the day. The curtains were still drawn. The hearth had not been stirred. No basin of warm water sat on the washstand. No soft-footed servant had entered with lowered eyes and careful hands. The air belonged to her alone for a few minutes, which meant she could lie still without performing calmness for anyone. She did not move. The ceiling above her bed had a faint crack near the plaster rose, thin as a dark thread. She had known it since childhood. When she was small, she imagined it as a river on a white map, leading somewhere no tutor could follow. Later, she decided it looked like a flaw someone had painted over badly. Now she stared at it and thought that even houses revealed themselves if watched long enough. Aster Hall was full of hidden faults. That morning, she felt them everywhere. In the floor beneath her bed. In the walls behind the tapestries. In the vent high above the writing desk. She turned her head toward it. The vent sat where it had always sat, cream-painted ironwork shaped into vines and little flowers, too pretty to be useful and too plain to be noticed. Behind the grill, the clear backing caught the first grey light from the window and held it in a dull shine. Maribel had touched it the night before. She did not know why. Perhaps because she had felt watched. Not by a person exactly. Watched was too simple. It had been more like standing beside a frozen pond and sensing water beneath the surface, dark and moving. Absurd. She had slept badly and eaten little. Grief made strange suggestions. Still, the vent troubled her. She pushed back the coverlet and crossed the cold floor barefoot. The room had not yet warmed, the boards held the night. She stopped beneath the vent and looked up. Nothing. She dragged the chair from her dressing table across the floor, wincing at the sound. Then she climbed onto it, steadying herself with one hand against the wall. Up close, the vent looked older than the rest of the room. The paint had settled thickly in the carved leaves. Dust gathered along the top edge. The clear substance behind it was not glass. It had no ripple, no seam. Resin, perhaps, poured and polished long ago. Maribel touched it with 2 fingertips through the grill. Cold. Solid. She pressed harder. No give. Her reflection appeared faintly in it, broken by the iron vines, one eye, part of her mouth, a pale strip of cheek. Behind that, there was only darkness. Ridiculous, she whispered. The word sounded too loud in the room. She climbed down before anyone entered and moved the chair back exactly where it had been. By the time Annie's replacement came with warm water, Maribel was sitting at her dressing table with her hair unpinned and her face arranged into something less revealing. The new maid's name was Cora. She was older than Annie, careful, and frightened enough to be useless for anything except obedience. Her hands shook when she poured the water. Maribel watched her in the mirror. "Did Annie leave a message?" she asked. Cora's eyes flicked up, then down. "No, my lady." "Did she leave quickly?" "I don't know, my lady." "Did she cry?" Cora's mouth tightened. "I don't know." That meant yes. Maribel closed her eyes. Another person sent away because she had tried to move one small truth through the house. "Do you have family here?" Maribel asked. Cora paused with the brush in her hand. "My mother works in the laundry, my lady." "Then do not take messages from me." The maid looked at her in the mirror. Maribel met her gaze. "Do not accept anything I offer you. Not letters. Not rings. Not favors. If I ask, refuse. Cora's face softened with startled confusion. My lady. Please. The word made the maid more nervous than an order would have. Yes, my lady. Cora brushed her hair in silence after that. Maribel endured it. She had always hated being brushed when upset. The slow pull at her scalp made her feel like a child being prepared for display after tears. When Cora finished, Maribel chose her own dress before Serapha could send one. Grey. Plain. A shade too severe for a young woman supposedly preparing to receive a suitor. Good. Breakfast arrived in her room. Toast, stewed pears, tea, a boiled egg. She ate half the toast because refusing all food had begun to feel like giving her father one more way to measure her. She drank the tea though it had cooled. The pears she left untouched. They reminded her of autumn evenings in the orchard with Elias, when fallen fruit softened underfoot and he joked that Lowmere apples were too sour even for sinners. Elias. His name did not come gently anymore. It entered like a blade wrapped in cloth. Still sharp, only quieter. She had spent the first day defending him to an empty room. The second inventing disasters. The third despising herself for hope. The fourth hating him, then hating the hatred because it felt like her father's hand moving inside her chest. Now she no longer knew what she believed. That was the cruelest part. A wound had an edge. Confusion spread. She replayed every moment. Elias at the tithe table, mouth too honest for safety. Elias by the bridge, warning her about stone as if gloves mattered. Elias in the chapel rain, looking at her like the world had gone quiet without permission. Elias beneath the apple tree, saying she knew the word hard but not the shape of it. Elias asking her to come with him. Elias watching her leave. Had there been farewell in his face? She could not remember. Memory had become untrustworthy. It changed depending on what she feared. A knock came. Not Serapha's tidy tap. Not Cora's nervous one. This knock had no question in it. Maribel set down her cup. Come in. Her father entered. Lord Edric Aster looked rested. That angered her before he spoke. He wore a dark green coat with a black collar, his hair tied smoothly, his expression composed in the way walls were composed. He glanced at the tray. You ate. Should I apologize? No, I am pleased. How nourishing for us both. He ignored that and walked toward the window. He did not look at the vent. Of course he did not. Why would he? It was nothing. A fixture. A decorative square of painted iron. Maribel watched him anyway. I am riding to the North Farms this morning, he said. Lord Halbrecht's party will arrive tomorrow instead of Friday. So haste has joined the family. Alaric is eager to see you. Alaric does not know me. He has met you. He has seen me. Edric turned. There is a difference. Yes. Then allow him the opportunity to correct it. Maribel stood. Must we perform this conversation every day? Until you understand it. I understand perfectly. No, he said. You feel strongly. You mistake that for understanding. She laughed under her breath. And you feel nothing, so you mistake emptiness for wisdom. Her father's face changed only slightly. It was enough. Careful, he said. With what? Your patience. With your need to wound. That struck closer than she expected, because it was true enough to hurt. She did want to wound him. Not because it solved anything. Because he stood before her whole, and she felt torn open by questions he would not answer. She crossed her arms. "Where is Elias?" "There." The name in the room. Her father's gaze did not move. "Gone." "Where?" "East, by most accounts." "Whose accounts?" "The town's." "You mean yours?" Edric sighed. "You are determined to make me the author of every disappointment. You do have the style for it." "My dear." No. Maribel stepped closer. "Say his name." A long silence followed. "What purpose would that serve?" he asked. "Say it." "Elias Seldo," Edric said at last, cleanly, without effort. Maribel hated him for being able to say it so calmly. "You know him," she said. "I know of him." "You knew enough to forbid me the South Wing." "I knew enough to protect you from a mistake." "A mistake does not vanish before dawn." "People do." She shook her head. "Not him." "Your certainty is touching." "My certainty is mine." "Was," Edric said. The word slipped between them. "Small." "Fatal." Maribel felt the room tilt slightly. "What does that mean?" Her father's expression remained unreadable, but something in his eyes sharpened, as if he had said more than he intended and resented her for hearing it. "It means certainty rarely survives evidence." "What evidence?" "His absence." "That is not evidence." "That is what I am questioning." "You question it because the answer humiliates you." Her face heated. Edric's voice lowered. "You would rather imagine conspiracy than abandonment." "It preserves the romance." "It keeps him noble." "It makes your pain grand instead of ordinary." "Stop." "It is ordinary, Maribel." "People leave. They desire, they promise, they tire, they fear consequence, they choose themselves. It happens in cottages as often as courts." She wanted to strike him. The desire came so suddenly it frightened her. Her hand even moved before she caught it and curled her fingers into her skirt. Edric saw. For one moment, father and daughter stared at each other across a distance neither had built alone. Then he said, "Alaric arrives tomorrow. You will be courteous. And if I ask him to help me find Elias?" "You won't." "Why?" "Because if you turn a respectable guest into a participant in this embarrassment, I will send Tomas Reed to the Southern Work Roads for vagrancy and have Mary Seldo's lease reviewed for arrears." The room lost its air. Maribel's voice came out quietly. "There you are." Edric did not look away. "There you finally are." "I am exactly where I have always been." "No," she said. "You were behind curtains. Now you are in the room." He approached her then, and for a moment she saw age in him. Not weakness. Where? Fine lines near the eyes. Silver at the temples. A man who had spent years becoming iron and called it survival. "Maribel," he said, "do not force me to become harsher in order to keep you safe." She looked at him with something colder than anger. "You enjoy that sentence, don't you?" His mouth tightened. She continued, "The way it makes every cruelty sound like shelter. The way it makes me responsible for the hand around my own throat." "Enough." "Yes," she said. "It is." He left soon after, though he would have called it ending the conversation. Maribel remained standing until the door closed. Then she crossed to the vent. Not quickly. Not as a revelation. More like a person returning to the place where an unease had begun. She stood beneath it, looked up, and whispered, "What are you?" Below her, though she did not know it, Elias stood on a crate with one hand pressed against stone, listening as if her question had touched his skin. The house gave her no answer. By afternoon, Aster Hall had changed its breathing. Suitors required preparation. Servants moved through corridors carrying linens, flowers, polished candlesticks, extra coal. Guest rooms were opened and aired. Silver was counted. Cook sent a boy to the market for citrus and cursed him before he had even left. Lady Serapha entered Maribel's room with 3 gowns over her arm and the expression of a general approaching difficult terrain. The rose silk, Serapha said. No. The pearl muslin. No. The blue. No. Serapha closed her eyes. My lady. Bring me sackcloth. I'll decorate it with family jewels. This is not the moment for mockery. It is the only moment for mockery. Lord Halbrecht's son is not your enemy. He is arriving through a door my father locked from the other side. That makes him something close. Serapha laid the gowns across the bed. You may find him agreeable. I don't want agreeable. No. You want absent. Maribel looked at her. The older woman's face tightened with regret. I did not mean. Yes, you did. Serapha folded her hands. Then I meant badly. That was new. Serapha rarely apologized. She usually adjusted her mistakes until they resembled lessons. Maribel sat at the dressing table. Tell me the truth, she said. If I can. Do you think Elias left? Serapha stood behind her. In the mirror, their faces appeared together, Maribel pale and young with anger under her skin, Serapha narrow, controlled, made sharp by years of being useful. I think, Serapha said slowly, that men often do whatever costs them least. That is not an answer. It is the answer life has given me most often. Not all men are the one who chose your sister. Serapha's mouth tightened, but she did not retaliate. No, she said. They are not. Maribel turned in the chair. Then what do you think of my father? Serapha glanced toward the door. That, too, was an answer. Maribel leaned closer. You're afraid of him. I am employed by him. Those are not the same. In houses like this, they are cousins. Maribel lowered her voice. Would he hurt Elias? Serapha did not respond. The silence expanded. Maribel stood. You think he would? I think Lord Edric would do what he believed necessary. What a clean way to say something filthy. My lady. Do you know where Elias is? No. Would you tell me if you did? Serapha looked at her for a long time. No, she said. Maribel's throat tightened. At least it was honest. Honesty had become rare enough to hurt when found. Because of my father. Because I am afraid, Serapha said. Because I have no family who will take me. Because women without money survive by being useful to people who can dismiss them. Because courage is praised by those who do not have to eat afterward. Maribel had no answer. Serapha touched the back of the chair lightly, not quite touching Maribel. I am sorry, she said. Not enough to become brave, perhaps. But truly. The apology settled between them, inadequate and real. Maribel looked at the gowns on the bed. Pearl muslin, she said finally. Serapha exhaled. Not blue, Maribel added. No, Serapha said softly. Not blue. That evening, Maribel was permitted to dine downstairs. Permitted. She hated the word, hated how it inserted itself into every hallway, every staircase, every mouthful of food. She descended with Serapha beside her and Garin Pike several paces behind. Captain Pike did not look at her directly. He had not done so since the night she came back from the orchard and found her father waiting. She noticed that now. She noticed everything now. The formal dining room had been arranged for the Halbrechts' arrival, though they had not yet come. Extra chairs stood ready like polite threats. White flowers filled the long table. Candles burned in polished silver. Her father sat at the head, speaking with Ven, who stopped when she entered. Maribel looked from one to the other. Ven bowed. Lady Maribel. Clerk Ven. His name tasted unpleasant. She sat at her father's right. Serapha sat farther down. Garin took his place near the wall, as guards did when pretending not to listen. Dinner began. Soup first. Clear broth with herbs. Maribel lifted the spoon, lowered it, lifted it again. Across from her, Ven spoke of road repairs and tenant assessments. Her father asked about the mill bridge. Serapha added one comment about the weather with the air of someone placing a cup carefully on a shelf. Ordinary talk. That was what made it monstrous. Somewhere, Elias was missing. Mary Seldo was grieving or searching or both. Tomas Reed was likely tearing himself apart with guilt. Annie had been dismissed for kindness. And here were spoons, napkins, flowers, wine. Maribel looked at Garin. His gaze flicked away. Not fast enough. She set down her spoon. Captain Pike. Her father's hand stilled near his glass. Garin bowed. My lady. When did you last see Elias Seldo? The room changed. Ven stared into his soup as if it had become suddenly fascinating. Serapha's face went pale. Edric turned his head slowly toward Maribel. Garin did not answer. Maribel watched him. Did you hear me, Captain? Yes, my lady. And? Garin's face remained fixed. I do not keep account of every tenant boy in Lowmere. A pity. My father does. Edric said, Maribel. She did not look at him. Captain. Garin's jaw tightened. I saw him at work in his field some days ago. How many? I could not say exactly. Before or after people began saying he left. Maribel, Edric said again, softer. This time she looked at him. What? Am I embarrassing the soup? Ven made the grave mistake of breathing too audibly. Maribel turned on him. And you? When did you last see him? Ven dabbed at his mouth with a napkin. Lady Maribel, I hardly. You hardly what? Notice the poor unless they owe something. Enough, Edric said. Maribel stood. The chair legs scraped the floor with a sound that made every servant in the room freeze. No, she said. Not enough. Nothing in this house is enough. Not answers. Not kindness. Not truth. We have rooms full of everything except the thing asked for. Edric rose too. His face remained controlled, but his voice cut through the room. You will sit. No. The word came cleanly. There was no performance in it. No cleverness. Just refusal. Her father stared at her, and in that stare she felt the edge of what he could do. Mary's lease. Tomas's freedom. Serapha's position. Cora's mother in the laundry. Every life attached to hers by thread, every thread in his hand. So Maribel did what she hated. She sat. The defeat was silent and complete. Dinner continued for 12 more unbearable minutes. When she was finally excused, she walked upstairs without rushing. Pride had uses. It could not open doors, but it could keep one from running where enemies could see. Inside her room, she dismissed Cora at once and locked the door. Then she went to the vent. She dragged the chair over again, climbed onto it, and gripped the iron grill with both hands. "I know there is something wrong," she whispered. Below, Elias stopped breathing. Her voice was faint, but he heard it. He stood beneath the shaft, looking up at the blurred oval of her face through resin and shadow. "I don't know what," Maribel continued. "I don't know where you are. I don't know if I am losing my senses speaking to a wall." "I'm here," Elias said. Maribel pressed her forehead near the grill. "I don't think you left." Elias closed his eyes. The words struck him harder than any blow could have. "I wanted to," she whispered. "I wanted to hate you because it would have given shape to this. It would have let me stop searching every silence. But I don't think you left." "I didn't. My father knows more than he says. Garin knows something. Serapha is afraid. Annie was dismissed. Tomas never received my note." Elias gripped the wall, eyes burning. "You're so close." Maribel's fingers tightened around the grill. "What are you hiding?" she asked the vent. Then, almost too quietly to hear, "What is this house hiding?" A sound came from the corridor. She froze. Elias looked toward his cell door as if the sound had entered both rooms at once. The knock came sharp and controlled. "My lady," Serapha called. "Open the door." Maribel climbed down quickly, moved the chair back, and crossed the room. "One moment." Her voice was steady. Elias admired her for that. Hated the need for it, but admired it. Serapha entered with Cora behind her carrying night linens. Her eyes went briefly to the chair, then to the vent, then to Maribel. She had noticed. Maribel saw that she had noticed. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Serapha said, "Your father has ordered that your door remain unlocked tonight." Maribel laughed once. "How intimate." "He also asks that you sleep." "My father orders sleep now. He recommends it with consequences." Cora busied herself with the linens, face lowered. Serapha stepped closer to Maribel and lowered her voice. "Do not examine old walls too openly." Maribel went still. Serapha did not look at the vent. She did not need to. "What do you know?" Maribel whispered. "Less than I fear." "Tell me." "I cannot." "You mean you will not?" Serapha's eyes flicked toward Cora. Maribel understood and went silent. The rest of the evening passed with Serapha seated near the hearth, embroidery in her lap, pretending not to be a guard. Maribel prepared for bed under observation, hating every folded garment, every lowered lamp, every sign that her own room had become public property. But the vent had changed. It was no longer nothing. It was a question. And questions, unlike daughters, were difficult to lock up. She lay awake long after Serapha's breathing grew steady in the chair. The fire dimmed. Wind pressed at the window. The house clicked and sighed around her. Then, near midnight, she heard something. A faint scrape. Not from the door. Not from the window. From the wall. Maribel opened her eyes. She did not move at first. Serapha remained asleep, chin lowered toward her chest. The room was dark except for the dull glow of embers. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. Maribel's heart began to pound. She turned her head slowly toward the vent. Nothing moved. Scrape. The sound was almost too faint to trust. It could have been a mouse. Old pipes. A branch against stone outside. Except there was no tree near that wall, and the sound carried a rhythm too human for pipes. She slipped from bed. The floor was cold beneath her feet. She crossed the room inch by inch, watching Serapha after every step. The older woman shifted once but did not wake. Maribel reached the wall beneath the vent. The scraping stopped. She stood there in the dark, barely breathing. Below, Elias crouched with the broken edge of the clay jug in his hand, staring upward. He had heard movement above. Not Serapha. Not the maid. Softer. Closer. He knew her by sounds now, by the way the room changed when she entered a silence. Maribel placed her palm against the wall. Elias saw the pale shape of her hand through the resin-shadowed angle, though not clearly. He rose slowly onto the crate. She tapped once. Very softly. Elias nearly forgot how to breathe. Maribel waited. Nothing. She tapped again. Below, Elias pressed his forehead to the stone and laughed without sound, because if he made noise he might lose everything. Then he tapped back. One scrape of knuckle against stone. Maribel jerked away as if shocked. Serapha stirred in the chair. Maribel turned at once, heart hammering, but the older woman only shifted and settled. Slowly, Maribel faced the wall again. Her eyes were wide now. She tapped once. Elias tapped once. She tapped twice. He tapped twice. Her hand flew to her mouth. The room spun around her. Not with fear alone. Recognition had entered without proof. Impossible recognition. The kind a rational mind rejected even while the body understood. Someone was there. Not the wind. Not mice. Someone beneath the wall. She looked up at the vent. Behind the decorative grill, the resin reflected only darkness. Maribel climbed onto the chair with care so slow it hurt. She leaned close, her fingers gripping the ironwork. Who is there? She breathed. Elias heard only the murmur, not the words. But he knew the shape of the question. He pressed both hands against the sides of the shaft and brought his mouth as close as he could. Elias. The sound died below, as always. Maribel heard nothing. She closed her eyes, thinking. Then she climbed down, crossed to her writing desk, and found a hairpin. Long, thin, silver. She returned to the vent and began probing at the edges of the resin through the iron grill. Below, Elias watched in desperate silence. Yes. Yes. The hairpin slipped once. She caught it before it fell. She worked carefully, jaw tight, searching for a seam, a latch, any weakness. The resin did not move. It had been poured thick, sealing the vent behind the grill like frozen water. The ironwork itself had no visible screws from the room side. Whatever fastened it had been painted over years ago or set from within the wall. Her hand began to shake. No. She forced herself calm. Aster daughters were trained in useless patience. Perhaps she could steal some use from it. She tried again. Behind her, Serapha woke. My lady. Maribel froze. Serapha sat up in the chair. The two women looked at one another in the dim red light. The hairpin was still in Maribel's hand. Serapha stood slowly. Step down, she whispered. Maribel did not move. Serapha crossed the room, face pale, and spoke more urgently. Step down now. There is someone there. The words were barely air. Serapha's eyes flicked to the vent. I said step down. You know. No. You know. Serapha reached for her. Maribel pulled away. Below, Elias gripped the stone, unable to hear enough, able only to see movement, fear, two shadows in a room above him. Maribel pointed at the vent. There is someone beneath this wall. Serapha's voice trembled. You must not say that aloud. The confirmation entered Maribel like lightning. She climbed down from the chair. Her bare feet touched the floor. Who? She asked. Serapha closed her eyes. Please, Maribel said. For once in this house, let someone be human before being useful. That broke something in the older woman's face. She looked toward the door. Then toward the vent. Then at Maribel. I don't know, Serapha whispered. A lie, or near enough to one. Maribel stepped closer. But you fear who it is? Serapha did not answer. Maribel's voice changed. It became small. Not weak. Worse. Hopeful. Is it Elias? Serapha's mouth opened. No sound came. Maribel understood. A person could answer with silence. She had learned that from her father. The room seemed to fall away. Below, Elias watched Maribel stagger back one step. He saw her face clearly now through the vent's blurred square, shock first, then disbelief, then a grief so sudden and vast it seemed to empty her of blood. Elias, she said. He heard it. Not perfectly. Not loudly. But he heard his name in her mouth. He struck the wall with both hands. I'm here. Serapha caught Maribel by the arms before she could climb again. No, Serapha whispered sharply. Listen to me. Listen. If you make noise, if you wake the guard, if your father learns you know, then whatever mercy remains will end. Mercy. Maribel's voice cracked. You call this mercy? I call it not yet worse. Maribel stared at her. Then she turned toward the vent, and this time there was no confusion in her face. Only horror. Only love returning too late to the right address. Elias, she whispered again. Below, Elias pressed his hand against the stone beneath her. Maribel placed her palm against the wall under the vent. They could not touch. Not really. But for the first time since the orchard, they both knew where the other was. The knowledge did not free them. It made the cage visible. Serapha began to cry silently, one hand over her mouth. Maribel did not cry. Not yet. She stood with her palm against the wall, breathing through the shock, while beneath her Elias leaned into the stone as if his body could remember warmth through it. Then footsteps sounded in the corridor. All three froze. A guard passed the door slowly. The steps faded. Maribel lowered her voice until it was almost nothing. I will get you out. Elias could not hear the words, but he saw her mouth move. He understood anyway. Hope rose in him so fiercely it hurt. Serapha shook her head. My lady. Maribel turned. There was something new in her face now. Not the wounded pride her father had been shaping. Not the confusion he had fed. Not the girl waiting by windows, searching for a boy in the wrong direction. This was colder. Clearer. My father buried him under my room, Maribel said. Serapha flinched. Maribel looked back at the vent. And thought I would never look down. The fire gave one last soft collapse in the hearth. Outside, Aster Hall slept above its secret. Inside the wall, the secret had begun to answer.